Hey, I'm Luke Ford, and I just had some thoughts on the theme of how do you change your life? And this theme has been so important to me because I've had this kind of low level depression throughout my life. I think it's called dysthymia. And so, life, I was really eager to change things up. And so, I found various things over the course of my life that changed my state and seemed to change my life. So I'm trying to think the first thing that I discovered to deal with my depression, even though I didn't have that vocabulary or self knowledge, was when I was about 6 or 7 years old. My parents were very busy preparing a communal meal at our home. And so they asked me to just like, please leave them alone and not create, any distraction for a couple of hours because they had important things they needed to do. And so I said, okay, I'm just going to sit in a chair and tell myself stories. And so I sat in the chair in the living room and I just told myself all these adventure stories because at the time I was reading books. I was reading, I think, books like Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson and Coral Island, another children's adventure tale. And so I just started telling myself an adventure tale, except I was right in the middle of this adventure. And I was suddenly like kind of taken out of my troubles, taken out of my dysthymia, my low grade depression, to a much happier world. And I didn't realize it, but I was getting high. Perhaps for the first time in my life, I was getting high from the experience of fantasy. And I just tell myself these elaborate stories. And my parents were thrilled because I was just out of the way. I was thrilled because I was feeling good. I was happy. And I developed from this. I started writing stories, and my stepmother even typed one up. My first story was about my best friend and I. We went on a raft like in Huckleberry Finn, and we went floating down Dora Creek, which is, we lived about a mile outside of Avondale College, which is a Seventh-day Adventist college in New South Wales, Australia. It's about 30 minutes from the city of Newcastle, about 30 minutes from the coast, about 2 hours drive north of Sydney. 2 hours drive definitely away from Sydney. So you can find this funny Russell Crowe video before he became a big name actor where he's promoting Avondale College. So just look it up on YouTube. So that was my adventure story, and much of it were these very detailed lists of all the food that I wanted to buy at the Sanitarium health food store. And we had a very strict diet in my home. So my fantasy was mainly about the types of food that I'd be able to buy for this trip because I kind of get away from my parents' supervision. I remember kind of in eighth grade, I was invited to a friend's home for a Sabbath lunch, and it was such a thrilling experience because they didn't limit the amount of peanut butter you could eat. When I was growing up, my parents would like limit the peanut butter because they said it had too much protein and fat and it wasn't good for you. But here at this house, the Muth family in Pacific Union College in Angwin, California, I could put all the peanut butter I wanted on my plate, on my bread. Also, I could drink all the juice that I wanted. Like, we were not allowed to drink with our meals growing up in my home, my Seventh-day Adventist home, because it was bad for the digestion. And family, suddenly I was able to eat all the peanut butter I wanted and drink all the juice with my meal. And that's the best thing, is you're able to just like talk freely about girls. So this is eighth grade, and you're absolutely not allowed to have a girlfriend in my home. My dad would march around the campus like breaking up relationships, like particularly like interracial relationships. He said the Bible was against interracial relationships, and then he'd break up my older brother's relationships. Like if my older brother got a girlfriend, my brother would have been 14 or 15, the age when most kids, what they most want is a boyfriend or a girlfriend. And my dad would go around to the home and break it up. Can you imagine how mortifying that was for my brother? So I remember one time a girl called my house in seventh grade, and like my stepmother came running down the driveway to where I was standing and said, this girl called Jeannie called. Said she's in your class. I go, yeah. Well, who is she? What's your relationship with her? So I didn't like literally completely have a romantic relationship with Jeannie, but she wasn't just another girl either. We would play these keep away games in the Pacific Union College pool. Also, this is a Seventh-day Adventist college, so it was pretty morally strict. But we'd play these games where you just take a ball and it'd be girls against the guys, and you just throw it back and forth, and just try to keep away from each other. But the whole purpose was it gave you an opportunity to put your arms around the other person, and get some physical contact. And but because of my very religious, kind of very awkward, very cold home, I didn't know how to touch a girl, and so I'd just roughhouse. I'd be so rough, and Jeannie would, say, talk to Luke about being more gentle, and because I would just like grab her like I'd grab a guy and dunk her, and treat her like a football. But I'd hang out with Jeannie. She was this chubby blonde and very amiable disposition. I guess she was kind of a type, would account for at least half of my girlfriends being like a little bit chubby and very amiable, easy to get along with, like tremendous tolerance for my eccentricity. And she did once ask the teacher to ask me to stop farting. But good times. So anyway, I learned as a kid like to fantasize. That would get me out of my misery. And then I discovered books on sex in my parents' library. And so then I started fantasizing about sex. So when I was 6 or 7, I'd fantasize about having adventures like Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer, Treasure Island, and the book Coral Island, or the adventure stories of G.A. Henty. When I was about 8 or 9, my fantasies kind of shifted more in the sexual, romantic realm, but they've been pretty much fixated ever since. So I learned that fantasy would get me out of my troubles. Then I developed a best friend around age 6 or 7, and I discovered that being kind of adopted into his family, so his name was Wayne Cherry, and being adopted into the Cherry family, where there are about 6 or 7 kids, that kind of severely reduced my unhappiness. So I kind of yearned for adoption. And then I discovered that I'd feel less unhappy, the more friends I made, particularly if they were the cool friends, kind of higher up in social status. There was this one guy, Patrick Layton, Leighton. His mother was my 3rd and 4th grade teacher, and he was so cool. I think now he's like a vice president for Citibank. But he was really smart, really cool, and I got to hang out with him a bit. And so I found that, I got what you could call borrowed functioning by kind of getting myself adopted by these more high-functioning people. It kind of got me away from my own low functioning. But the problem was it didn't last. I was always kind of thrown back to my own resources, and borrowed functioning never worked for long. In 5th grade, I took up jogging. I literally tried to like run away from my problems, and I'd go for a jog like 2 or 3 miles every day. And then by 7th grade, I was running marathons. I was training about 6-7 miles a day, and I finished 5 26-mile, 385-yard marathons when I was 12. And I had this dream that I'd set world records one day, but actually I never finished a marathon in less time than 4 hours and 12 minutes. So fantasy obsessions with girls, that would kind of bring me out of my misery. Then in 8th grade, halfway through, my parents moved to Washington, D.C., and I got to stay with friends of the family, and I got a lot happier. I was always happiest in my childhood when I was away from my parents. Not a knock against them. That's just how it was. Like, my experience of life was that pretty much every other home I knew was a warmer, happier place than my home. And whenever I'd have to go back to my home, it always felt kind of cold and unhappy. So I started reading excessively at about age 7 or 8, and that would kind of take me out of my misery. Some days I'd feel like I'd finish like 5 books. Some days I'd finish 5 books, and all that reading and just being lost in these other stories would take me out of my unhappiness. When I moved to America, to California, to the Napa Valley, to Pacific Union College in 1977. I just turned 11. So the summer of 77, I spent it almost all in the Pacific Union College library. So I started out reading books on World War II. Then I started reading books on Weimar, Germany, but there were like too many racy photos that kind of got me all a jangle. So then I started looking at magazines, probably looking for that intense charge. And so I went through every issue of Time magazine. I'm not saying I read every part of the contents, but I literally had my hands every issue, Time magazine, from the time it started in the 1920s up till the present. And I went through every issue of Newsweek, and I went through every issue of Life magazine, and then I went through every issue of Sports Illustrated. And I really got excited by Sports Illustrated, and I became hooked on sports, and I became a sports fanatic. So instead of spending my time reading lofty books on world history and on World War II, I was like reading books on the Dallas Cowboys. It became my favorite football team. So sports fanaticism kind of took me out of my misery. It was, I guess, another extension of having a fantasy life, but it was only a palliative. It didn't really transform my life for the better. First fell in love with a girl who reciprocated when I was 16. So that was the summer before my junior year of high school. So that's the summer of 1982. So that made me high. And I remember I had friends, the Muth family, tell me, you're just in love with being in love. Didn't realize they were right, but absolutely was a love addict, because I just so loved being in love. It just took me out of that miserable state, which was kind of the norm for me. So it was a distraction, get me out of my misery, and also got me kind of connected to someone else. So that experience of being connected always reduced my misery. I took up the practice of journalism, writing for my high school and local newspapers when I was 16, and I became good at it. So that kind of gave me something I was good at, and it kind of gave me an entree into what was happening in the community around me and in my high school, and gave me a little bit of a taste of being a big man on campus. So I loved that. But again, that high didn't last. And I'm a little bit sleep deprived. So I lost Monday and Tuesday from work because I was ill. And then I pulled a couple of 16-hour days, got all caught up. But the last 2 days got up at 3 a.m. So I know for me, I always had like the sharpest self-revelations, around 2 a.m. So I'm still kind of in that 2 a.m. state now, even though it's 3 p.m. in the afternoon, because I'm sleep deprived. So I have less inhibition. So maybe I'll be more honest. So I've never read Maya Levin's Gore and Ignore. I've never read John Updike's Couples. I have read Portnoy's Complaint on multiple occasions, but only after I converted to Judaism. So Christianity did not play a major role in my internal life. In my external life, huge role growing up, because my father was a Christian theologian, Seventh-day Adventist theologian, Desmond Ford. And so I was a preacher's kid, and I had to read 40 pages of dense religious texts every day and write summaries of them, type up a one-page summary. As far as my inner life, I yearned for fame, attention, sex, and romantic obsession. I think people who don't grow up learning to connect normally with other people, it's very easy for them to become obsessed with getting attention. So I was very much an attention seeker. And I found that getting attention would kind of make the pain of my depression go away for a little while. So I was just always seeking more and more attention. And any career that I would embark on, it had to bring me like the maximum of attention. So I thought with my gifts that journalism would be the best fit for me to get the maximum of attention. I finally became a good student at junior college, became a straight A student. I was accepted to UCLA to major in economics. And I was getting up at 4 a.m. to study calculus because I'd never done well in math, but I found when I applied myself, I could get straight A's. And then I was kind of building myself up with my success at school. I was also working an extraordinary number of hours in landscaping, so I had about $30,000 in the bank. So through work and school, I was kind of building up my sense of self, but I didn't really have time or the skills to have many friendships and relationships. And so when I got quite ill in February of 1988, I didn't have anyone to fall back on. I was just so lost. Just so lost. I just didn't know what was happening. I found I couldn't exercise anymore. I had to drop off of my classes at school, and I struggled on. I went to UCLA for a year, but I was sick the whole time. So, work, accomplishment, school, that wasn't going to change my life for the better. UCLA, I started having sex for the first time. I got, a girlfriend with whom I was having regular sex, and that did seem to like diminish the pain. And I did feel less alone, but I knew it wasn't the cure for what ailed me. So that's when I discovered Dennis Prager on the radio, on KABC radio in Los Angeles. And over the course of about a year of listening to him and reading his books on Judaism, I thought, Judaism's the answer. I'll convert to Judaism, and that's how I will change my life. And I'll get out of this like chronic depression and lose a status that I'm stuck in. And so there were intoxicating highs for the next few years at times as I immersed myself in Judaism. There's a lot of interesting intellectual material to study. There was some like moral insights that I got into life. I made friends with Jews. I expanded my world. I met women. I got girlfriends. Yes, so the Dennis Prager I'm talking about is the Prager University guy on YouTube. I remember when I was really getting into Judaism, I completely desisted from masturbation for about 18 months. So I was like really pure. And I went downstairs in my parents' home to where I had a collection of Penthouse magazines. And when my parents were gone, I took them to the trash heap and I burned them. Like I was no longer going to mess around with that pornography stuff. And I wouldn't even shake hands with women. Like traditional Orthodox Jews won't shake hands with a member of the opposite sex unless that person is a spouse or a family member. So I wouldn't even shake hands with women. And then I said, I don't have to be so fanatical. So I abandoned my no FAP policy. And then I started placing singles ads. And then I started meeting women. And then just a switch just flipped. And I just wanted to have sex with as many women as I could possibly do, in as many ways as I could possibly do. And I was just like a light and felt alive, but there were tremendous highs, tremendous lows, because this would create a lot of conflict because I was just pursuing what I wanted, which put my will in conflict with what was best for the people around me. And so my life was just this drama of ups and downs and sleeping with more and more women. And then the underlying depression was not even shifted. So I was still pursuing my religious quest of conversion to Judaism. It was severely compromised by my out of control, sexual and romantic obsessions, and the religious change. I could even tell it was kind of more like a change of uniform or a change of location. Like some drunks, move to a new city, thinking that'll help them get over alcoholism. So I moved to a new religion, thinking that would get me over my depression and feeling alone and my life just not working. Hey, thanks for you guys in the chat room. I just got home, just thought I'd do this spontaneous stream on think about how do you change your life. And I'm prompted in part by a tweet by Jordan Peterson that I read this afternoon. He says, these are the positive outcomes from psychotherapy that researchers have found since at least the 1980s. Here they are. You face your fears, you articulate your experience, you plan your future, you speak the truth. And these are all fundamental elements of a general psychotherapeutic practice. So my life just didn't work. And I was kind of casting around. And I moved to Los Angeles. And I managed to make about 2/3 of recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome. I'm still pursuing Judaism, and I'm pursuing women, and I'm pursuing, like, trying to make friendships in new communities, and I'm grossing people out, and I'm connecting with some people and alienating other people. My life is just boom, boom. It's just, up and down, up and down. It's like I got the flu one day, and then the next day I'm going to bed in the back of my 1979 Toyota station wagon, with a beautiful young woman. Just, absolute fantasy material. Some women that I'd lusted over for years. Now I finally, landed them. And then I go from that to, just horrifying some people who I thought, were becoming friends. So I couldn't sustain a lot of friendships. I was developing a reputation as like a male whore. So again, my life didn't work. So I thought I'd pursue a career in acting, because then I'd get, like, maximum of attention. I thought I'd be good at it. And I also went on auditions for modeling jobs, and not surprisingly, nothing came of that. And I was thrown out of 3 acting schools. And in the 3rd acting school, they gave me this advice: you're better suited for, like, some kind of solitary endeavor. They suggested stand-up comedy. But I said, no, I'll write a book. I know I'm a good writer. And so I thought, okay, I think I'll write a book on how to be a good person, because I want to be a good person. I know my life doesn't work, but I know there are answers in Judaism. I know there are answers in the teachings of Dennis Prager. I know there are answers in the people and experiences that I'm meeting in Los Angeles. I'll write a book on how to be a good person. So I sent Dennis Prager a letter and said, hey, I'd like to build on some of your teachings, kind of expand them into a book on how to be a good person. This is the summer of 1985. So understandably, Dennis Prager didn't really want his teachings funneled through my screwed up self. Like, we went to temple together on Shabbat mornings, Stephen S. Wise temple. We didn't get a lunch together. We weren't, buddies. We were just, acquaintances. And he was someone I admired. So he said, no, stay away from trying to, build my teachings into anything. And it was completely understandable. Like, why would anyone want to put their reputation in the hands of this, eccentric guy? So, yeah, I love this alkaline water. I find it really energizing, I really shouldn't drink it after about 2 or 3 p.m. because then I won't sleep. But if I drink this water, I can get by on less sleep because it's so energizing. So I'm still casting around for a book to write on, and at the same time, I'm very much stuck in my romantic and sexual obsessions. And because I'm so screwed up, I can't really sustain a relationship with any decent girl. So I'm just, like, screwing around a lot. I'll start something with someone, and once she gets to know me, she'll dump me. So, stuck in my sexual obsessions, I think, oh, maybe I'll write a book on sex. Maybe I'll write a book on sex in film. Maybe I'll write a book on the pornography industry, because Dennis Prager recommended these books by the late UCLA psychiatrist, Dr. Robert Stoller. The Dynamics of Sexual Excitement was one such title. And Stoller wrote a couple of books on the pornography industry, which was centered in Los Angeles. So I thought, oh, I'll bring a Torah perspective to the pornography industry. And I was able to make a living from writing about the pornography industry. So I was able to make a living from writing, which made me happy. I became famous. I got to sleep with more women. But I also got tremendous amount of ostracizing. My life just kind of shrunk. When I moved to Los Angeles in 1994, like, my life expanded. Like, it's like, wow, there was just so much to choose from. But once in fall of 1996, when I started research on the pornography industry, and then actively going around to pornographers to interview them, I felt my life kind of compress and narrow. And decent people were kind of understandably repelled as they found out what I was doing. So this was definitely not changing my life for the better. And then I got thrown out of my favorite synagogue, my favorite Orthodox synagogue. And so I decided, oh, psychotherapy. I know I need psychotherapy. I dabbled in it. I had maybe 15, 20 sessions, no more than 25 sessions of psychotherapy prior to the spring of 1998. So I began regular weekly psychotherapy. And I ended up having about 10 years of psychotherapy between 1998 and 2015. Between 1998 2015, I had more than 10 years total of psychotherapy. And it did help. I was always different when I walked out of psychotherapy, and different in a good way. Like, I didn't do crazy, self-destructive, harmful, toxic things immediately upon leaving a psychotherapy session. I always saw myself more clearly. I got valuable feedback. I got good things to do. I got useful concepts. It was good for me, but it didn't change my life. It didn't change my life. I remember when I was pursuing acting, and I was looking for teachers, and I was speaking to this one woman about various acting teachers that she was going to refer to me to, and I said, I want someone who will change my life. Like, I've always been looking for someone to change my life. I've always been trying everything to change my life, because fundamentally I was miserable. Fundamentally I was depressed. Fundamentally I was alone. And as part of my kind of reinvention, when I turned 40, I got a gift certificate from a friend, like $50 gift certificate or Amazon.com. So I bought the book, The Game, Inside the Secret Society of Pickup Artists by Neil Strauss. And so I read about the pickup game. I didn't really practice it, but I was fascinated. And in his sequel to that book, the rules of the game, kind of a dating guide, Neil had one sentence on something called the Alexander technique. He said that it would improve your voice quality, your overall health, and most of all, your posture. And I'd always had really bad posture. And this book said women like men with good posture. So I said, at the same time, I got this credit card offer, said pay no interest for 12 months. So I went out and signed up for Alexander technique lessons. And I liked it, and I felt my posture improving. And then one day my teacher said, maybe you'd like to become an Alexander technique teacher. And I said, yes. I was always kind of looking to do the opposite. Like, if my life wasn't working, I was always kind of open to doing the opposite. So after I completely quit writing on the porn industry, I said, oh, I'll become an Alexander technique teacher. Just like before I came down with chronic fatigue syndrome in 1988, I was determined to become a PhD in economics. And I got sick for 6 years, and I came out of that illness. I said, well, must do something the opposite of what I was doing before I got sick. So I said, oh, I'll pursue acting, acting and modeling. And that didn't work out. So I'll become a writer. And then by fall of 2007, I saw I couldn't make a living as a writer anymore. I was definitely done with writing about the porn industry, kind of casting about for close to a year, and I found the Alexander technique and said, okay, I'll become an Alexander technique teacher. And Alexander technique really helped. I very rarely have aches and pains, really have back pain. I move much more fluidly, I have better voice quality, my health is better. And one of the great things about the Alexander technique is that it kind of reduced my body armoring. So excessive muscular tension is a form of body armoring. And then you're not at your best when you're kind of locked into certain ways of going about through life. So by taking the Alexander technique, I was able to slowly kind of remove these layers of excess bodily tension or body armoring. And in my second year of teacher training, and Alexander technique teacher training is every day for 3 hours. It's not like some weekend yoga certification. It's every day, 3 hours, 3-year program, 36 weeks a year. And near the beginning of the second year, the end of the week, I think I said to myself, I'm just going to go home and be gentle with myself. And I'd never spoken like that in my whole life to myself. Like, my normal way of talking to myself was, you dumb F. you stupid F, you really F this up. F. That would be kind of like the down part of my bipolar cycle. Don't mean I'm literally bipolar. I've never literally be diagnosed with bipolar syndrome, but I've always had some tendencies in that direction. Tendency to get a little too high, a little too low. So when I'd get high, I'd think it's a situation in the Orthodox Jewish community, and I was going to these classes, and it's absolutely incumbent on my well-being that I be on good behavior. And I was, under the desk of these Torah classes, I was like running my hands all over the legs of this woman who was sitting next to me. Just totally like reckless behavior. That's kind of the upside of the of my bipolar cycle, and then the downside, I feel like there was no hope. There's nothing I could do to get well. I was just doomed. So Alexander technique, it helped me in the first 3 months of my teacher training. I went off all my psychotropic medications. I went off my lithium. I went off my clonidine, went off my clonopam. So I was now on no psychological or psycho meds. And I was able to just maintain more of an even keel simply by the practice of the Alexander technique. Certainly not recommending this to everyone on prescription medication, just telling you my story. And I was still going to psychotherapy, and in 2011, I started taking a writing class. No, it was in 2010, I started taking a writing class, and then I was also doing it in 2011. And for a writing exercise, I thought, I'm going to write about what I find most erotic. And I read that story to my therapist, who said, that sounds like eroticized rage. And so I was transfixed by that term, and so Friday afternoon, I rushed home and Googled the term and just read for an hour before Shabbat. And I realized that I definitely did have eroticized rage. It was a symptom of sex addiction. And then I said, okay, I need to get help. Many people before this had suggested I might be a sex addict or a love addict, and I'd benefit from going to a 12-step program for sex addiction. A rabbi friend of mine suggested this, and I always kind of poo-pooed it. I always kind of looked down on 12-step programs as being for weak people. I always thought of myself as having the will to do anything. So I started going to a 12-step program for related to my sexual and romantic obsessions. And for me, it wasn't any particular behavior. I've never been a flasher or a rapist, or never been inclined to criminal sexual behavior. I've never had an affair with a married woman. I've never cheated on a girlfriend. I've never been caught masturbating to pornography or any of that kind of behavior. So it wasn't that level. It was more an obsession of the mind and just an inability for my life to work and to take off. Like in my 20s, late 20s, when I moved to LA in 94, I was 27, and converted to Judaism. And I was seemed to be kind of at a similar place with my peers. But as I went through my 30s, my peers steadily got married, had kids, got mortgages, and their careers thrived. And none of that was true for me. So my life just didn't work. Going to this 12-step program for about a year, just going to meetings. And kind of felt like it was a competing religion to my Orthodox Judaism. So I wasn't giving myself wholeheartedly to my 12-step program. And then I read a book on 12-step programs and defined them as a para-spirituality. So when I understood them as a para-spirituality, was a spiritual practice, then I saw there was no contradiction or competition with my religion. Then I started working the steps, and working the 4th step in particular just transformed my life. 4th step, you do a complete and thorough moral inventory. So I listed off everybody I resented, why I resented them, how they'd harmed me, and then what role did I play in this resentment, and how could I have done things differently. And I was so amazed. I just felt this transformation as I was writing this out. And I felt my resentment start to fall away. A lot of unnecessary body tension kind of melted away along with it. And I was so inspired that I worked every 4-step worksheet There are a lot of different approaches to the 4 steps. I worked every 4-step worksheet that I could find online. This is summer of 2012 now. And oh, wow. So I started going to other 12-step programs for emotional addiction. So by working a thorough 4-step and working the 12 steps, I was able to let go of the resentment that was kind of crippling me and distorting my life and getting in the way my relationship with other people. So first 3 steps are about healing your relationship with God. Steps 4 through 9 are about healing your relationships with other people. Steps 10 through 12. Steps 10 through 12 is just the whole Megillah. Healing relationship with yourself, with God, with other people, and to reduce the things that you do to get in the way of leading a unified, holistic life, a life that works. So I've known many people who have converted to Judaism, including Orthodox Judaism, and I've never seen the conversion change their life in the way that 12-step programs do. With very few exceptions, I've never seen anything that changes people's character like 12-step programs do. Now, I have to admit, I have seen some people be fundamentally and completely, thoroughly changed by converting to Christianity, which is weird for me to say this in that I left Christianity for Judaism. But I remember there was this guy at Placer High School, Steve Pittman. He was a football player, and he's just a very nasty, bullying, angry guy. And he was about 2 years below me, Placer High School. I always kind of kept my distance from him, didn't like him. And then came back to town a couple of years later, and he was this serene, happy, smiling guy with a wife and kids, and he was a born-again Christian. He was just like this great guy. And I have seen other people changed by a complete conversion to Christianity, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone's moral character be transformed through becoming more Jewishly religious, through becoming more observant. What happens when you become more observant of Judaism and of Torah law, you develop a stronger in-group identity. So you're more generous and loving towards your fellow Jews, particularly your fellow Orthodox Jews, but you're also simultaneously become more suspicious, fearful, and resentful and negative towards out-groups. So typically, in what I've seen, is people become more observant, more move towards more Orthodox Judaism in their life. Their world kind of constricts because the kosher laws make it, difficult to eat with people and drink with people who are not Orthodox Jews. There's so many laws that your world just kind of constricts and becomes largely about either work or socializing with Orthodox Jews. The more observant you are, the more difficult it is to socialize outside of Orthodox Judaism. By contrast, I notice for many people when they convert Christianity or have a born-again experience, their world expands. And they seek more and more opportunities to be of service to other people and to love other people. I'm not saying either one of those approaches are better or worse, just telling you what I've seen. What unites them as it relates to this topic is that I've rarely seen becoming religious fundamentally changing someone's character. So if someone's angry before they become a born-again Christian, in my experience, they're almost always angry people afterwards. Someone's depressed before their conversion, that depression's still with them. Someone's resentful, that resentment is still with them. Someone's selfish and mean and nasty, that goes with them, whether they become a religious Christian or a religious Jew or a Buddhist. I have almost never seen fundamental character change happen through a religious change. I have seen it happen with psychotherapy, but rarely. Rarely have I seen anyone's character, or say their narcissism, fundamentally change through psychotherapy or through joining a cult such as, Kundalini Yoga or Landmark Forum or Scientology, etc. Rarely have I seen a character transformation, but I virtually, when someone works the 12 steps, I can see the change, and it's the most gratifying thing in the world. So, I think everyone who's miserable wants to change their life. And I have tried everything. And the only thing that really made a difference has been the 12 steps. So some other things that have helped. I love this device. It's like the Fisher-Wallace device. And it's really good for reducing your depression, anxiety, and helps you sleep. So I just hook it up like this every night. And just go to fisherwallace.com. That's really, so my friends noticed ever since I started doing this every night, I just smile like 3 times as much. Like he noticed a tremendous difference in my happiness level from doing this. What other things have really changed my life? The medication modafinil, M-O-D-A-F-I-N-I-L, really helped my cognitive processing, not getting tired as I went through the day, but able to still think, and gave me real thirst for learning, much more sustained, and just helped my brain function much more effectively. So I went on that in June of 2013. So taking that most days since 2013, that really helped. Also helped me lose weight. The Alexander technique helped me to drop a lot of my excess body tension and body armoring, which was preventing me from experiencing life in a new way. I was kind of stuck in certain habitual responses to life. That did not serve me. Conversion to Orthodox Judaism was an amazing experience, but it didn't fundamentally shift my moral character. So I took my same flawed psychology into my conversion. So those are just a few thoughts off the top of my head on the subject of changing one's life. And talk to you guys later. Bye.